Did you know that a lot of languages in the world have to follow the same logic when it comes to syntax? Today, let's talk about morphosyntactic alignment. If this word scared you, don't worry, I'll explain everything so you can understand what I'm talking about and understand more about how languages work. In this video, I'll focus on the nominative-accusative alignment, which is found in English. But first, what is a morphosyntactic alignment? It's a fancy way to describe how arguments of a sentence are organized around a verb. And what do I mean by arguments? Simply the subject and the object of a sentence, or more precisely, of a verb. Let's look at an example to make sure this is clear. In the sentence, I eat apples. Eat is the verb, and I and apples are the arguments. I is the subject, apples is the object. The verb tells us what action is performed, while arguments tell us who is performing or who or what is impacted by the verb. In other words, verb and arguments tell us all the essential information of a sentence so we can understand it. As I mentioned, English is technically a nominative-accusative language, although it's not the most obvious case. We'll go back to that point in a moment. And you may wonder now, what does nominative-accusative alignment mean? Languages that follow this alignment have the following characteristic. The subject of a transitive verb is marked the same way as the subject of an intransitive verb, while the object of a transitive verb is marked differently. By the way, when talking about morphosyntactic alignments in linguistics, you'll likely see the letters S to represent the subject of an intransitive verb, the letter A for the subject of a transitive verb, A for agent, and O for object. And here's the last definition for this video, transitivity. For a verb, we talk about transitivity if there is an object in the sentence. Let's look at our example from earlier. I eat apples. In this case, eat is a transitive verb, meaning there is a subject and an object that are associated with the action. If I just said I eat without any object, then the meaning would be different. You'd understand that I'm currently eating, but you don't know what. When there is no object, we say that the verb is intransitive. Verbs are either transitive or intransitive. But you may notice that there are cases where a verb seems to be both. For the case of the verb eat, it looks like it can be either transitive or intransitive, and the meaning of a sentence will be impacted. In a way, it's true, depending on the sentence, but what's important here is that it's never both at the same time. Eat is either transitive or intransitive, but not both at the same time. Some verbs are easier to distinguish. For example, I arrived. Arrive is always intransitive. I cannot add an object to this sentence because arriving only applies to me. I can add other information to that sentence, but it won't be an object. Arrive is always intransitive. Other examples can include it rains or he runs. For verbs that are always transitive, there's like, for example. You cannot just say I like on its own. You need an object to describe what you like. So verbs are either transitive or intransitive, and sometimes it may look like it can be both, but keep in mind that they cannot be both at the same time. So let's go back to understand this nominative-accusative thing. While English is a nominative-accusative language, it's not too obvious most of the time, except when looking at pronouns. So we'll first look into examples with English, but then with another language to make sure the picture is clear for you. As I mentioned, in this alignment, the subjects of transitive verbs and of intransitive verbs are treated the same way, but not the object. Now let's look at an actual example with English. Henry slapped Joe. Henry is the subject, slapped the verb, Joe the object. With this sentence, we understand that Henry is the one who hit Joe. Henry slept. Here we have an intransitive verb, so just the subject, Henry, and the verb sleep. If I change these sentences by using the pronoun he, we will still have the same meaning, and in other scenario, Henry or he are the same. He slapped Joe, he slept. The way they are marked, whether Henry or he, is with nothing. The marker is nothing. In some languages, you can add a letter at the end or something similar. In English, the marker nothing is what we call a null marker. Like I said, it's not too obvious. But what if I replace Joe with him? He slapped him. The meaning of the sentence is the same. Granted, we know what we are talking about, but Joe is not replaced by he in this case, but rather by him. This is where you can see that the object is following a different treatment than the subject. If it was the same, we would say he slapped he, but that's not the case. And this is what a nominative-accusative language looks like. In sentences with transitive or intransitive verbs, the subject is marked the same way, but the object is not. But like I said, English is not the most obvious example of that, so let's look at a different example from another language to make sure everything is clear. Russian is a good example where the subject and object are marked in a more obvious manner than English. Sobaka lejет. The dog barks. Sobaka vidит меня. The dog sees me. Я вижу собаку. I see the dog. With this example, we can see that the word for dog has a different ending depending on its role in the sentence, if it's the object or the subject. While English has a null marker, the example of Russian allows us to see the marking in a slightly more obvious manner. I hope that you now understand what a nominative-accusative language is. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments.